The white supremacists are under pressure, and it's only getting worse day by day. They've seen what's been happening the last several years. These protests have got them shook and scared. You see, the problem that they've got is that the protests themselves are extremely popular. They don't have an answer to it. Back in the day, you had Tommy Lauren a few years ago calling herself arguing with Trevor Noah, and she made it very clear exactly what the white supremacist problem is. It's not a matter of whether or not some athletes are just standing still saying nothing. It's the fact that they're doing it at all. White supremacy is ultra hypersensitive to anything that seems like defiance because of how weak and corrupt it is. And so, if they see anyone doing anything that defies them, they immediately go on red alert. They have to. They don't have a choice. Because they know that any defiance that goes unchecked will become habit forming, because they know exactly how evil and wicked and unpopular they are. They know that if anybody didn't have to put up with them, then no one would put up with them. So that's the reason why they are always looking to see if anybody's disagreeing. And that's what brings us to the mass killer, Kyle Rittenhouse. What these white supremacists want is to kill protesters, period. That's what they want. They want to be able to show up and gun down protesters, period. CNN last month was forced to report on how, what a surprise, the brave men and women of law enforcement who never harm anyone, by the way, and never would, well, a few of these brave individuals who put their lives on the line every day and would never harm the public were caught on video saying that they were going to be hunting protesters. That was their word. Hunting protesters from their own body cameras. Well then, I guess we now know that from the police's own mouths, they just went ahead and copped to what we've been saying all along. Rittenhouse was there specifically for the purpose of carrying out killings of protesters in the hopes that this will intimidate people and scare people. It won't. But what they've done is they've made it now very clear that dealing with these white supremacists, as soon as you see one, you know that this guy is here to commit a mass shooting. So the people are going to just decide, you know what, I'm not going to wait for this guy to open fire on me. The white supremacists have created now that scenario, and it's going to be everywhere. There's already a protester who happens to be on trial right now because he defended himself from one of these idiots who thought that he was going to run over the protesters with his car. But while the white supremacists are trying to find a way to assuage their bruised and battered psyches with this Rittenhouse farce, which everybody already knew from the jump how it was going to turn out, they're trying to paint this as some sort of win when the reality is this is cold comfort. This happens to be a loss. What they need is for this mass killer to be venerated and loved, and that's not happening. He's not being embraced. Nobody outside of attention-whoring GOP congressmen are giving any sort of praise to this guy. In fact, he happens to be a very shameful episode that they would just like to forget about. Let's just move on from this. They're not going to be able to make a hero out of this guy. Hell, if he had been convicted, they wouldn't have been able to make a martyr out of him either. So they had a choice between a huge L or a small L. Very difficult for them to try to eke a win out of this one. But there is just the undeniable fact that when white supremacy gets to this point, that's how you know that they understand they're on their last legs. The use of child soldiers, that's what lawless and immoral regimes do. It's the mark of a group who is losing. So they've been reduced to making children do their fighting. The Confederacy was left with no alternative but to have inbred brats as young as 14 years old fighting for them. At the end of the Nazi regime, Hitler was forced to take the Hitler Youth from being a glee club for the Nazis to being active frontline soldiers for them. This is all about a bunch of insecure white supremacists who are trying to make themselves feel better. We're going to take to the streets. We're going to show them who's boss. We're going to kill some people and show them we're in charge. We're in charge. But if they were in charge, then where the hell were the throngs of militia in Kenosha last year? Where were they at? Rittenhouse had his buck-toothed self taking pictures with white supremacists, the Proud Boys, at a bar, not on the front lines. And where were the Proud Boys or the 3%ers or the Oath Keepers? Where the world were any of them? They were online posting memes. The Proud Boys would pose with Rittenhouse, but they weren't about to get out there with him. Using children to fight for someone, to fight their wars, that's something that all degenerate groups have in common. This is what degenerate groups do right before they lose. Rittenhouse has thrown away what future he might have had, and truth be told, you can look at the boy and tell that his prospects were extremely limited. Pulling a trigger is about the most work that he's actually qualified to do. But he threw away what future he might have had, and in his case, state mental health disability money is about the only future he could have looked forward to, just so he could get some adulation from a bunch of bottom-feeding white supremacist losers like himself. George Zimmerman is still in hiding. Same for Daniel Pantaleo. Oh no, Daniel Pantaleo, he already understands that he better try to figure out if there's a way that he can get his NYPD pension as soon as possible, because he's not getting promoted. Betty Shelby, once these rednecks and white supremacists decide that they've got their jollies saying, hey, we hired so-and-so or we're keeping them on the payroll, they're like, well, we can't actually do anything with them. You try to promote them, that means they're going to become more high profile, and that makes a target out of them, so we can't really do anything with them. They can't show their faces, and now Rittenhouse joins them. It's a life sentence. These people are not running around getting attention for themselves. They're laying low. The only thing worse than being locked in a cage is when the entire world becomes your prison. Only time you hear about Zimmerman is after he's done some private broom closet appearance somewhere. He makes sure you can find out where he's been, but he ain't about to tell anybody where he's at or where he's going. These days, he's got some right-wing nut filing nuisance defamation suits for him. The idiot in question's name is Larry Klayman. He's some right-wing moron who basically thinks that it's cute to get some attention from Fox News saying, I'm filing a suit against so-and-so for defamation. You said that this racist guy over here is a racist. I'm going to say defamation. Yeah, after you get Sean Hannity to chuckle and say, that's right, you show him, then after that, you wind up losing your law license. Larry Klayman has been suspended 3 times in the last year. This is what he gets for his attention whoring. The guy's 70 years old, and he is the poster child for vexatious litigation. For those of you who don't know what that means someone who files tons of lawsuits as a form of harassment and to cost people money needlessly. That's what he does. He's a right-wing extremist, and he's sued practically everyone he's ever met, including fellow right-wing nut Roger Stone. That suit got laughed out of court. Before that, Klayman filed a $100 million lawsuit against Robert Mueller on behalf of a client who the Mueller investigation was looking at. That lawsuit got thrown out too. This walking hemorrhoid Klayman, he's had 2 judges ban him from their courtrooms for life. He's sued the D.C. bar for trying to disbar him. He lost that lawsuit too. So this is the class and caliber of attorney representing George Zimmerman. A 70-year-old moron still trying to hit the lawsuit lottery. I guess he figures that if he files enough lawsuits, the law of averages has to kick in sooner or later, doesn't it? Oh, but you know, that's not the only attorney of Zimmerman's who seemed to have legal trouble. His other lawyer he had in the past, Hal Uhrig, that guy got arrested just last month on charges of solicitation to commit perjury and witness tampering. By the way, the person that this Uhrig character was trying to allegedly get to commit perjury was a child victim of rape. The moron's talking about how, Rittenhouse, he should sue the media for their reporting. Let me tell you something. George Zimmerman tried that too. He sued NBC and NBC won. So you got these morons who clearly have been living on a steady diet of lead-based paint and meth, and they're saying, well, what about the Covington kids? They sued CNN and Washington Post, and they got like $250 million. Listen up, stupid. First of all, their so-called lawsuit, out of the 33 charges that they had in it, the judge threw out 30 of them. Second of all, nobody knows what it is that CNN and Washington Post settled for, but you can bet that if the judge threw out most of their dang case, they didn't get much. Even Salmon himself tries to pretend as if, we got paid big. But he ain't saying how much it was, because I guess it'd be a little bit embarrassing to say, well, I got enough money for cab fare and a coffee, and well, at least I got something right. That's what's going on here. These guys are saying, well, Rittenhouse needs to sue. He'll wind up just like George Zimmerman. That's how he'll wind up. But for these guys, this is the game that they're playing. They're having to go for these consolation prizes because they know that they're not winning. They know what victory looks like. They saw it last year. So George Zimmerman, Daniel Pantaleo, Peter Liang, Betty Shelby. Rittenhouse now joins this infamous list. He's chosen to be a hero to the losers, and since there's no honor among thieves like Zimmerman and Pantaleo, he'll soon be forced to admit that they have no use for him. He'll play the victim like these chumps always do. Hell, he'll be running around like Clayman talking about how he was betrayed before it's all over. When they always learn that they gotta accept the white supremacy only needs them to the extent that they can be used to own the libs, or to get some quick jollies saying that we did something that disrespected or tried to antagonize black people. That's why you got George Zimmerman always doing some attention whoring stunt. And he always makes these announcements online from an undisclosed location, because that's how proud he is. Oh, he can walk the streets freely, you just can't find him anywhere, that's all. Dude's in witness protection for all we know. But Zimmerman's always doing some attention whoring stunt because he's desperately trying to see if there's any more money he can get out of those angry white supremacists. All of that little angry racist money done dried up years ago, and he's desperately trying to get that donor machine going again, because what the hell else is he going to do? Nobody's going to hire him. Nobody wants him around. Nobody wants this guy within 100 miles of him. Hey, remember me? Give me some money. It'll make the black people mad. Clearly, he ain't had many takers. The rule about white supremacy breaking its tools, that also applies to its useful idiots. You see a Rittenhouse or a Zimmerman or a Pantaleo, white supremacy doesn't break them per se, but it does abandon them. White supremacy has no loyalty. It has no principles, only situational ethics and moral relativism. It's got a demonic thirst for control, but that's about it. And after it gets a few cheap laughs with some miscarriage of justice or some racial outrage or another, it'll want to move on to the next one. Somebody on Twitter had asked me, what did I think would happen if he had been found guilty? What do I think would have been the optics or the response if Rittenhouse had been found guilty? Well, I can tell you exactly what it is. Same thing that they did when Chauvin was found guilty. Same thing when Jason Van Dyke was found guilty and Amber Geigers. They would be telling people, oh, we did our... See, the system works. The system works. The system works. They wouldn't be pointing out that, gee, look how rare this is. They wouldn't be saying that. They would be trying to use it as a means to reinforce a lie. System doesn't work. Happens to be one of the exceptions. If the system worked, this would be the rule. And of course, if that had been the case, the DA in Kenosha would not be mentioning that, say, the entire reason that Rittenhouse and his notoriously thuggish pals decided that they would come to Kenosha was because we refused to prosecute the attempted murder of Jacob Blake. If we had just prosecuted that attempted murderer, then hell, none of this would have happened anyway. They wouldn't mention that. They wouldn't be saying that. They would leave that part out. And if Rittenhouse had been convicted, the white media would be claiming that, well, probation, he's very young, he's very, very young. And you can't prove that he came to Kenosha to kill those two men in particular. They'd be saying the same thing they say about police whenever they kill black people. Well, probation would be an appropriate sentence. Justice was served. They would be all saying the lie that this proves the system works. This proves the system works. Nothing needs to be changed. This proves the system works. So that's what would have happened if Rittenhouse had been convicted. At least that's what the optics would have been, because that's what they always are. As Neely Fuller said, white supremacy believes in taking both sides of the conversation. If they win, well, that's just the way it is. You better believe in the system, buddy. That's the way it is. You didn't have a case. You didn't have a case. You just didn't have a case. If they're forced to have to make a pawn sacrifice, then it becomes, well, the system works. See, the system works. So now you can't tell us to change anything. The system works. So now we don't have to change anything. That's the reason why I was telling people that this trial wasn't going to end in a mistrial. If it did, then there would be pressure to bring the prosecution up again. The public wouldn't allow the DA to just let this one go. So the judge put on his performance for the jury and the cameras. And the DA, who I am convinced was in on it, they clearly weren't giving this the old college try. I mean, these are the same guys who refused to prosecute the attempted murder of Jacob Blake, which is why all this happened. And people were out there protesting the attempted murder of Jacob Blake, and Rittenhouse comes along to kill him, and you think the DA wants to put him in prison? The DA gave token resistance, pretended to be miffed. Man, this stuff smells stage managed. It was all phony as far as I'm concerned. Whether they sat down with each other and decided, well, you do this on this day and we'll do this on the other day or not, is irrelevant. The point was these guys knew exactly what it was, what outcome it was they wanted. This was the outcome that the DA wanted. The DA refused to prosecute the attempted murder of Jacob Blake, and when they saw how people got outraged about that, they would love the idea that somebody should do something about those protesters. Well, as Isaac Newton said, for every action in this universe, there is an equal and opposite reaction. You cannot expect a situation where you have a corrupt injustice system that makes it very clear, just blatantly in front of everybody, shows its complete and thorough bias and contempt for its own written laws. It makes it clear we don't give a damn what we've written on the page. Hell, we don't care what the intent of the law is. It's whatever we say it is. Well, that becomes habit forming. Lawlessness begets lawlessness, and white supremacy is not law at all. It's nothing but white supremacist fiat. Whatever they say on Monday, that's the law. They say the exact opposite on Tuesday, then that's the law. And on Wednesday, if they say something completely different, that's the law. And on Thursday, if they say the same thing they said on Monday, then that's the law. The more we continue to keep pressure on them and don't let up, we are forcing them to delegitimize themselves. But that doesn't change what it is that we're doing. You make sure that you carry personal protection with you. Because these white supremacists are setting up ambushes and they're carrying them out with the open collusion, cooperation, and organization of the police. Those white supremacist thugs who attacked that Black Lives Matter demonstration in Minneapolis after the murder of Jamar Clark, they were bragging about how they had friends in law enforcement, sheriff's deputies and such. They talked about it online. They knew people in law enforcement. They were very proud of that. Until their little ambush backfired. And then now all these bastards are in prison. They all got felony jackets now. And whatever happened to all those friends in law enforcement? Same thing that happened with Jason Van Dyke and Michael Slager and Amber Geiger and Derek Chauvin and Roy Oliver and Newman Raja. And if you look at the cases, particularly trash like Newman Raja and Amber Geiger, one of the things that you notice is these convictions are sticking. As TBA pointed out in his broadcast just last night, Amber Geiger has made her failed attempt to try to get herself out of prison early. She's filing appeal. Can you let me out early? They said no. And that was on the 18th. And just a week earlier on the 9th, Newman Raja, he was that Florida cop who murdered Corey Jones in cold blood. His 25-year prison sentence got upheld. He's failed to make his appeal too. His appeal fell flat. The court told him, go to hell, go back to your cell, do your time. So just this month, in only the span of a single week, you have had 2 murderers who thought that their badges made them invulnerable to the law. Not only did they find out they weren't vulnerable to the law, they also found out that nobody's getting them out of prison. They're going to have to do their whole sentence. Now, in the case of Amber Geiger, of course, that's an absolute joke, or should I say an insult. But the point is, this stuff is happening on a continuum. White supremacy is ultra hypersensitive to which direction is the trend going. And when you overnight go from all of these murderers with badges can't be touched to, oh my God, they're getting locked up left and right, and the sentences are being upheld. These sentences are sticking. That means the courts are looking to go, we can't let you out. We can't help you. There's nothing we can do. Everything with a badge across the country, every racist with a badge is seeing that and realizing, yeah, you go down for this, ain't going to be no help, ain't going to be no backup. Nobody's cutting the sentence short. And that's the reason why you see the Kyle Rittenhouses running around. That's why you see the trash who attacked those BLM protesters in Minneapolis. These are the guys who the cops get to do their dirty work because now they're too scared to do it themselves. It used to be that the cops were absolute Teflon, couldn't be touched. Isn't that what trash like Jeffrey Jagoff Toobin was trying to tell people? Well, probably just trust the police. That's just the way it is. Nothing you can do about it. Hee. Well, now everything's sticking to them. They've gone from being Teflon to super glue. You've had 2 cops who have been convicted of murdering black people. Both of them have been trying to get themselves out because that used to always work. They used to get their sentence reduced, used to be let go. Newman Raja, his feeble attempt at getting an appeal, that failed. Florida Supreme Court rejected his appeal on a doggone reflex. They told you back to your cell, do your time. He's serving 25 years for that, by the way. See, this is what they're scared of. They see the way the trend is going. They were trying to impose an artificial ceiling on the sentences. That's what Amber Geiger and Jason Van Dyke was about. 5 years, doesn't matter how egregious it was, doesn't matter how clearly it was a murder. 5 years, 5 years. Nah, those numbers are going up. And 25, that ain't nothing. These bastards are supposed to be serving life. Because after all, if you just even shoot a gun in an officer's direction, even if you're not trying to hit the officer, even if you're not aiming at them, just the fact that you endanger their life, that's a life sentence. Ain't that true in all 50 states, right? Because they carry a badge, right? Because carrying a badge makes it different. Well, if they carry a badge, that means it ain't just assault. It's worse than that. You assault somebody, that's life in prison. You kill somebody, that's absolute automatic capital punishment. You want extraordinary protection under law, you're going to have to also take extraordinary punishment under law. That is justice. So don't let the headlines fool you. White supremacy loves to try to make their victories sound good and make their defeats sound even better. That's one of the propaganda techniques that they learned a long time ago. But while they're trying to make it seem like everything's coming up roses with Kyle Rittenhouse just this month, you done had 2 cops convicted of killing black folks having their appeals knocked down. So what's happening is these convictions are sticking. The convictions of these animals is sticking. So expect to see more cases where you got these judges deciding they're going to fall on their sword for white supremacy in this case. Remember the book that I keep referencing over and over again, When Corruption Was King, by Robert Cooley. He talks about as soon as he passed the bar, basically his first case as a mob lawyer was for a guy who had committed murder. It was obvious he committed murder. They had him dead to rights. But apparently he was a somebody, whoever this mafioso was. And the bosses wanted to make sure that this guy didn't go to prison. That was an order from the top capos. This guy, he don't do no time. He's a made man. He can't do no time. So Robert Cooley's like, okay, I'll go tell the judge that your boy can't do any time. Well, Robert Cooley said that he went to the judge and explained it to him, and the judge said, I can't get rid of this case. I can't throw it out. Because if I do, everyone will know that I am dirty, so I can't do it for you. It's so obvious this guy is guilty. I am sorry. I can't throw this one for you. It'd just be too obvious. And Cooley had to let him know, this comes from some of them really high-level gangsters, so if you don't throw this case, both you and I are going to wind up getting thrown in the river. Long story short, the judge threw the case. And that's what we see going on now. We see these judges like Tammy the Mammy, who presided over the Amber Geiger farce, and now this latest dirty verdict from Judge Schroeder. And with a name like Schroeder, I gotta wonder, what Nazi concentration camp were his folks' guards at? It's a fair question. But these judges, they're going to be the ones who more and more you're going to be seeing taking the most direct hand in trying to protect these white supremacists, trying to protect these race soldier thugs. Because they know that the juries can't do it, and the DA's looking and going, well, hell, the people are going to be coming at me. So the judges are like, well, I guess I'm the last ditch then. But that mess only works a few times. That's a trick you only get to pull a few times. Just like the grand jury dodge that they would do, you only get to do the grand jury dodge a few times. As soon as people start getting tired of it and going, you know what, there's no way in hell this many grand juries can be throwing these verdicts out. All the change was we focused people's attention on it. People are actually watching. The one thing that these thugs in the courtrooms thought would never happen. People are actually following the process to see what happens next. And they're looking and going, wait a minute here. Ain't no way that anybody in any profession gets this lucky. Obviously, these DAs are y'all throwing the cases. Then the case of Breonna Taylor. Daniel Cameron thought that the grand jury would remain silent. They came out and said, we're going to file a lawsuit so we can tell people not to blame us. So yeah, the DA's looking and realizing we're going to take the heat for this because the people know that we could get convictions if we wanted to. And the only reason we're not getting convictions is because we don't want to. Will the judges bail us out? So what's going to be happening, especially for black folks who understand the need to keep the pressure on and to keep protesting and keep calling out the white supremacists, taking to the streets to make sure justice is done? What about that? But before we get to that, first a word from the official sponsor of Black Empowerment, Power Tools. When you absolutely got to get the job done, make sure you carry your power tools at all times. You never know when you're going to need to drop the hammer, or some trash that needs to be blown away, or some obstacle that requires cutting down. You never know when a job's going to come up. So when it does, you make certain that you got that hammer on standby, that the leaf blower is at the ready, and always carry your steel. Power tools. Because no matter what your day job or side hustle may be, there's no excuse for not being ready to put in some work. We all know what's going on here. That's what this little fiasco is meant to illuminate. This little morale-building exercise for the white supremacists that fell flat. But what they're also putting on display is that they're willing to try this. This is where they want to go with it. They've been wanting to go there from the very beginning. What do you think all those laws that they passed saying that you can go ahead and hit protesters with your cars? That is, unless you got police who happen to be demonstrating in the streets, then you better not try it, etc. We know that's what it meant. It was meant for them to be encouraging going after people who are protesting police violence. And the Democrats have not been pushing back against it because they're in there with them. By the way, I think it bears noting, I've mentioned this before, but it needs to be repeated. Judge Schroeder, he was put on the bench by a Democratic governor. Back in 1983, it was a Democrat who put Judge Schroeder on the bench. And that's not new. Byron Della Beckwith, who murdered Medgar Evers back in the 60s, it was a former Democratic governor of Mississippi who famously went to the trial of Beckwith, his first trial, and shook the man's hand dead in front of the jury, showing, yeah, he's doing our work. When it comes to the two major parties where black people are concerned, they are both on the same page. Both major parties have the same policies where black people are concerned. We are up against an organized offense, hence we require an organized defense. We must support and affirm every black person's right to self-defense. What Rittenhouse did wasn't self-defense at all. This was white supremacist judicial fiat. But that's the entire point. You are not going to shame these savages into civilized behavior. You have to have a means to make sure that you ensure your safety. You have a right to protest injustice. You have a duty to protest injustice. And you also have a right to make sure that you can do so safely. So whenever some white supremacist thugs call themselves showing up with assault rifles, well, you make sure that you exercise your Second Amendment right. For someone to bring assault rifles in front of unarmed people during a peaceful protest, that is on its face provocative. It's meant to be. It's them telling you that they're here for the sake of killing people. And you got to make it certain that you are there for the sake of protecting people, starting with yourself. If you are hesitant or timid, then what happens is you're in a situation where your life becomes forfeit. You saw what happened with Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker defended himself. And what happened was, because you had a good judge on the bench, Olu Stevens, Kenneth Walker's a free man. DA knows that prosecution ain't gonna go nowhere. DA's mad as hell, but ain't a damn thing you can do about it. That's justice. I also highlighted for you the case of Andrew Coffey. It was another Breonna Taylor-style murder by the police. Police raided the man's home. No knock, just came in guns blazing. They shot his girlfriend to death. Andrew Coffey, fired back. And what happened was the DA said, we're going to charge you with the death of this innocent woman. We're charging you with her death. That is how freaking sick and demented and demonic these animals are. They barge into the man's home, guns blazing. They shoot an innocent woman to death. And then the man who defends himself, they say, well, we're going to charge you with her death. Why? You're responsible for her death. Well, the jury disagreed. Unfortunately, though, what they claimed was, well, the gun that you used to defend yourself, you had it illegally. You're a convict. You can't have a gun. You can't have a gun. Well, hell, who said the gun was his? Nobody said. Did anyone say the gun was his? And the DA is saying, well, we're going to demand you get 30 years because you're a convict with a gun. You shouldn't have had the gun. You have priors, so we're going to tell the jury, give you 30 years. The point of that one is, when the police are trying to put charges on people saying, you can't be defending yourself from police murder, you have to stand there while we kill you. You find that the people who actually decide to defend themselves, their right to self-defense is being upheld in court. These are the people who actually wind up going to court alive, as opposed to the unarmed people. Those are the ones who wind up getting killed. So if anything has been learned from this trial, which was nothing more than a farce, it was trying the public's patience, that's the only thing being tried, is that these guys are making it clear they're upping the ante. When they're showing up, they're not showing up for the sake of anything other than seeing if they can stage an ambush. You need to keep that in mind. When these guys show up, they're not showing up just because they want to stand around. They're showing up to see who they can pick off. They are the ones who made it where every time they show up, it is now a mortal proposition. So when you see them, understand that's what they're there for. You're not running because you're not the one in the wrong. They're the ones in the wrong. And that being the case, your top priority is to make sure that you guarantee your safety. Conscientious, peaceful protesters who are also aware of the fact that we live in a world of white supremacy, which requires that we exercise our Second Amendment right. Keep in mind, the Second Amendment right, that's not just for show. It's not a matter of, well, I sure hope that if I happen to have one of these implements on me, sure hoping that nothing comes along to, these bad guys with them, they've made it very clear they intend to start picking people off. And before any of the trolls or the white supremacists try it, nobody's saying to start anything. I'm saying what common sense and common decency requires, which is when some gun-toting thugs from out of town call themselves showing up with assault rifles to intimidate you, you be prepared to stop whatever it is they intend to start. For peaceful people, that's a hard transition to make. It goes against their nature. They're peaceful, of course. But this is the real world. You want to make real changes in the real world when the white supremacists show up for the sake of killing as many people as possible so that they can try to intimidate people from exercising their rights. You got to make it clear, I'm not going to be one of the intimidated. I'm ready to protect myself. But there was also another instance of some white supremacist who was flaunting the law. I'm talking about a clown named Evan Newman. You might have heard of this clown. He was one of the Capitol Hill insurrectionists from January 6th. The traitor Newman lived in Mill Valley, that's in the suburbs of San Francisco, so he's from Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris's neck of the woods. I say he lived there because when he found out that he had been identified and charges were pending, he suddenly had the hankering to sell his house for a cool $1.3 million and he fled the country. Now, according to the person who bought the house, the real estate agent who handled the deal knew that Newman had fled to the Ukraine. Now, before you can sell a house, doesn't the buyer or the bank do a background check, to make sure the house has no liens and, more importantly, that they're not buying a property whose value could be damaged due to any criminality by the people who live there or who had lived there previously? I mean, you would think that would pretty much be standard operating procedure, but I suppose with the housing market in California being what it is, some people ask no questions, huh? But another thing that gets me is if you're on child support, you can't travel internationally. They seize your passport or otherwise they invalidate you out of the system so your passport don't work. So how was this clown able to sell his house and able to book an international flight? Because his passport apparently had not been confiscated, hadn't been shut down or anything. All of these slap on the wrist sentences that we see these white supremacists and these terrorists getting, that's not by accident, that's deliberate. White supremacy's trying to keep peace in the family. See, white supremacy's got to think beyond the insurrection. As far as they're concerned, this is the occasional bump in the road. Some members of Team Evil get a little bit high-spirited, so you can't take your eye off the ball and start causing permanent divisions. Why? That's the whole lesson behind what had happened in Kenosha. You had some white people who were off code. They decided they were going to stand for justice, so you had some thugs come in from out of state making it clear, you white people who get off code, we're going to kill you. That was meant not merely as a punishment for having violated white code, but it was also meant as a deterrent to anyone else, any other white people who might decide that they would do the same thing. Total solidarity by all those who are classified as white, that is absolutely required by white supremacy because the most consistent and the most reliable foot soldiers for white supremacy are going to be those classified as white. So that being the case, you got to keep peace in the family. The racial goodies, guarantees, and giveaways that white supremacy hands out to those classified as white, that's the glue that holds all of them together. The tangible and, in the case of the media, intangible benefits that are bestowed on those classified as white. So when you start attacking those benefits, one of the main ones being immunity from law based on skin color, when you start attacking that and making it where, well, that's not going to make you immune from law, then, well, hell, you've taken away one of the primary reasons that being white is considered valuable. And how are you supposed to keep people in line if you don't have a system that gives rewards? You don't have anything to take away from them, so you got to make sure that they always get something. That way you have something you can take away. And this Evan Newman clown, when he finally made it to his final destination, which happens to be Belarus, because apparently that's where all the white supremacists want to hang out at. They all want to get cozy with the Belarus dictatorship regime, that Alexander Lukashenko character who Vladimir Putin's so chummy with. Well, Newman went on Belarus state TV, and they were just saying Black Lives Matters every chance they get. They said he is a good law-abiding American of the type who Black Lives Matters burned down their buildings, burned down their businesses. This clown had no business. Nothing of his was damaged by anyone. Newman also did an interview with Russia Today, another Kremlin-backed propaganda outlet. And in that interview, he claimed that when he got to the airport to leave the U.S., he had been interviewed by the FBI and let go. Now, these scumbags, they lie as easily as they breathe. That's what white supremacists do, so it's even money whether he's telling the truth or not. But one thing's for sure, he should never have been able to leave the country in any event. But if it does indeed turn out that in addition to his law enforcement friends letting him know that the pinch was coming down, because he loved to brag about that, I got friends in law enforcement, they let me know what's happening. If it turns out that he was indeed interviewed by the FBI prior to his leaving the country, well, I'd love to say that that's surprising, but nope, it sounds just about white. But Newman, showing that these white supremacists never take responsibility for their own behavior, he said that, well, he shouldn't have been charged with anything. Nobody expected to be charged because Black Lives Matter. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of people who were arrested last year during the uprisings. Many of them don't even know what they've been charged with. A lot of them still in prison today because of that. Oh, the government didn't need months and the FBI didn't need to plaster their faces to find out who they were. They had them found immediately and rounded them up. People are getting punished for the uprisings last year. But trying to overthrow the government, all these white people trying to do that? Crickets. But just another white supremacist who refuses to take personal responsibility for anything, because that's what white supremacy means. So understand, white supremacy is a system of injustice. Even when it pretends like it's holding these white supremacists to account, it's not. It's all some game. They're always making sure that they keep the white glove treatment on for the white supremacists no matter what. They always do that because that is the devil's bargain that they've made amongst themselves. They see the changes that black empowerment is forcing on the system, and they're determined to stop it no matter what. Now, this clown, he could have named a lot of things. He could have named Antifa. He could have named the IRS. Isn't that something that these white supremacists are always whining about? The IRS, the IRS. He could have been angry about a lot of things, named a lot of things. Instead, he said Black Lives Matter. Because basically what he's saying is, I'm a white man, and I got run out of the country, and these BLM people, they're still there. Yeah, because we stand our ground. This color don't run. But I just want to make sure that everybody keeps their heads on straight about what all's been going on. White media is trying to make it seem as if there was some titanic victory won for white supremacy last week, when the truth of the matter is it was just a morale-building exercise. Black people didn't learn anything new last week that we didn't already know. I think some white folk might have had a wake-up call. Though as for whether or not the lesson has sunk in, well, the jury is still out on that one. Black media only exists because of you. If you like the kind of uncompromising commentary and insight that you get here, hit us up on Cash App and be sure to give the video a like, as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that.